This week has several interesting transits going on, and I want to go through all of them with you kind of one by one with a real big highlight on two of them so that when things go down this week, when you see headlines or when you're feeling things on the inside, you kind of have this affirmation that it is okay that you feel the way that you do. So let's dive in. And first thing we'll do is look at the astrology chart for the week so I can explain to you what's going on up there that may be informing some of the things we're feeling down here. So here in our Luna astrology software, my highlight for the week that also kind of shows off some other things that are going on is this Mercury cazimi with the sun. So this is going to happen on the 14th. This is our halfway between Mercury retrogrades sort of period. Mercury will conjoin with the sun twice in its cycle, once while it's direct, once while it's retrograde. So this time Mercury is direct and it is conjoining with the sun again. It will surpass the sun by roughly 30 degrees or so. And at that point, it will retrograde back. And we can actually get a look as to what this is going to be. So if we click on Mercury again, we get our event coordinator in here and we can see when the next Mercury retrograde is. And that is August 5th. So between now and August 5th, we have Mercury now moving still direct, conjoined with the sun here and becoming what we would call an evening star. Because Mercury is now behind the sun as far as sunrise and sunset goes, you will see when Mercury gets about 15 degrees on the other side of the sun here that we will now see Mercury at night after sunset instead of before where we saw Mercury in the morning before sunrise. Mercury is a really interesting planet because its nature is to approximate the planets that it is near. And right now, we are having this feeling of it's not Mercury retrograde, but it kind of feels like it. And what's that about? I think that it is because of what is going on right now with Mercury. Typically, Mercury, as I said, will approximate the planets that are nearby. But right now, all of the planets nearby are in Gemini, Mercury's sign in Mercury's triplicity of the element of air. And so with this, everybody's answering back to Mercury. So Mercury's like, hey, what are we doing? How can I chameleon into the group here? And everybody's like, oh, we're doing what you're doing. And now Mercury is setting the tone rather than following the trend or adapting to the environment. So that is another reason why we might be getting the essential nature of Mercury, which is changeable and mischievous and all of these things that we might normally see more during a Mercury retrograde in a given sign. So if you're wondering why you want to blame Mercury retrograde for something when Mercury isn't retrograde, this could be part of the situation. Mercury is in their own sign of Gemini, which is an air sign, which is Mercury's triplicity. Mercury, especially on the 14th, in the middle of the day or so, is cazimi with the sun or exactly conjunct with the sun, which means that Mercury is as pure Mercury as Mercury can be, and in the context of Mercury's own sign and Mercury's own triplicity, with both the benefics, Jupiter and Venus, present in the same sign as well. The only thing that is drawing Mercury's focus away from Gemini right now is the separating aspect of the square with Saturn. But again, Mercury is moving away from that and by a good 5 degrees at this point. So it's really in Mercury's rearview mirror by degree anyway. And so this might be saying like we have a lot of ideas, we want to organize them, but even Saturn in Pisces answers back to Jupiter, who is Jupiter in Gemini right now, which is Jupiter's sign of detriment. So Jupiter is not really feeling resourced or isn't really feeling welcome or comfortable in this space and is truly answering to Gemini and to Mercury saying, what do I do here? I'm unfamiliar. So all of this seems to lead back to Mercury by these transits that are going on. The other thing that happens in the week actually perfects on the 11th, but I wanted to make sure I got really fine-tuned with our Mercury cazimi here. So jumping back in time to the 11th, which was, let me check my calendar, Tuesday. So if you're watching this on Tuesday, it is today. We can see that Mars gets back to the first degree, well, technically the second degree of Taurus, because signs start at 0 degree. So that 0 to 1 is the first degree, 1 to 2 is the second degree. So Mars is completing the second degree of Taurus here, just as Pluto is completing the second degree of Aquarius. And they are, if you look at this red line, square to one another. And so what we're experiencing here is a Mars square Pluto. Mars is moving faster. Mars was applying to Pluto. In this situation, we see that Mars is now 5 degrees past Pluto because, again, Mars does move faster and Pluto is moving backwards. So, what we're experiencing here is something that I think over the weekend a lot of us saw really coming up. Pluto is bringing in transpersonal or global topics to the conversation, and Mars, with that square, is saying there's change happening. It's change potentially having to do with a theme that both Mars and Pluto have in common of power and influence. So there's a lot of changes in the structures and the influences and the directions and the ambitions of the power structures in the world right now. And what we do see is, of course, elections going on across Europe in an election season for more than just Europe, right? Even the US is in an election period right now. So we do see this trend happening of changes in the distribution and the angle and the direction of the focus of power right now. So that's something that's also going on, that if you're seeing headlines and you're like, wow, the world feels really chaotic to me right now, you can at least see that there is a pattern at work here. And so it is something that will progress and that, gives peace of mind when things are feeling a little bit out of control. So my recommendation here, of course, is find where your power is. Bring this into your circle, bring this into your sphere and say, where do I have the most power and influence? Being all of the things that I am, bringing all the resources that I have and all of the skills and talents that I have in my arsenal, or in, it's very Mars word, but in my possession and in my skill set. And then make a difference, make a change, do something that feels productive to you where you have that control so that you can remember how powerful you are as well. So another thing I wanted to dive into here is the nature of squares. Of the aspects that are happening this week, we have Mars square Pluto on the 11th, as we talked about. You can see we have this aspect here of the Mercury square Saturn, as we kind of mentioned before. And then later in the week on the 16th, if we want to hop over to the 16th, we can take a look. We will cast that chart. On the 16th, we have Venus, who is having her square with Neptune. So that's a lot of square aspects. The nature of a square is a 90-degree aspect. So when you look at these two, even though they're connected by a single red line here, it is with a square. So if we were to go through the center here, it would be like a 3 o'clock on a clock face, which is a right angle. That's where they are to each other, creating this square, which gives the energy of action, of change, of something coming about. Traditional astrologers did say that this was the most challenging of the aspects because it brings something to our awareness. Nowadays, one of the things we like to say is this is where the action happens. This is where change occurs. It's noticeable because it requires us to take action. So it could be a really positive change with Venus being in the mix. There is this idea that there's a deeper peace of mind that you could be achieving, or some kind of information that you have to sort of juggle with Venus and Gemini, very close to Mercury and the Sun. Venus is thinking about information. Venus is focused on the details and is trying to keep everything in order where it feels a little bit sporadic. And Neptune by square is saying, hey, maybe actively try meditation, maybe pause yourself here and breathe. And so there may be this idea of I don't have anything under control at all, where the idea of letting go of needing control in a situation may be the solution. So you can see how we work squares to find the productive way to work with them now. But we have squares throughout. So the nature of a square is actually said to be the nature of Mars. So if you think about Mars and the qualities of Mars, ambition, change, challenge, all of those things, and think about a square, you can now kind of get that vibe or get that gist for what a square means between two planets. So you take what Venus means, put the nature of Mars between Venus and the planet that she's squaring, which would be Neptune, and say, how are Venus and Neptune going through these challenges right now in the context of the signs that they are speaking from and the resources of those signs that they are using in their conversation with each other. So I hope that that kind of helps make squares make sense when it comes to what does a square mean in your natal chart. Now you can look at your chart, take the planets that might have that red line drawn between them and see what their conversation might say to you now that you know this. I hope that that helps. Okay, and finally, the magic of this week. There's a lot going on in the world on a global scale that may feel overwhelming, and it may make us feel a little bit like we are not in our power right now because so many decisions are being made in realms and spheres that we don't have that direct access to. But I want us to remember that the power of the way that we see the world informs the way that we feel about magic, the way that magic can make its way into our everyday life. So I know one of the big things is, how can I make my everyday life more magical? And so in my Modern School of Ancient Wisdom this week, I shared the first axiom of magic from Bill Whitcomb's The Magician's Companion, which truly is the axiom of worldview, the law of worldviews, which is that the world is what you make of it. The world is how you decide to see it. So much of our impressions of the world are from what we have inside, what we know, what we've learned, what we believe, that informs the actions we take in the world around us and how we translate and interpret the things that happen around us. Do we have a more optimistic worldview so that when something comes up, we tend to approach it as an opportunity rather than something that is condemning us to failure? Do we have the worldview that everything happens for a reason? And so we're going to look for that reason and know that there is something that will work out from there. Or do we have the worldview that we have guides and energies that are supporting us and we want to be aware and acknowledge them in our everyday life? You get to define this. It is very easy. There is no way to get it wrong. There is only the way that leads you to feeling like you live in a world that you want to be in, at least within your own bubble, within your own sphere, within the way that you see things. And I will say that this has personally helped me with how the world has been over the past few years. The idea that I have my own worldview that helps me know that what is going on has some kind of meaning, there is some kind of purpose, or there is some way that I can find my place in it. Those things, the way that I do that, and I'm not going to tell you because I want you to find your own, but the way that I do that helps me go from day to day, not losing hope, not losing faith, and not losing the ability to see when it is my turn to take action and to see when it is my turn to rise to a calling and be able to make a difference for someone, which you can do individually, person by person, truly every day. So I hope that you consider your worldview this week as we go through all of the changes that are occurring, and you decide how you're going to perceive them and how you're going to take action on them and informed by them. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I look forward to talking about our full moon in Capricorn next week.